Well, the Bruins might have their easiest road game all season, and then they'll have their toughest road game remaining, all in 1 week. Let's talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, it's your favorite host. It's Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, host of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for your support. In the meantime, this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Just visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. Rumbling on here with Locked On UCLA. We're talking UCLA hoops today because the Bruins, they have an interesting week this week. They get Oregon, Oregon State, both on the road. And we know the Bruins not only dominate at home, they haven't lost in over a year at home. They have the nation's longest active home winning streak as they try to continue to get their winning ways. But the Bruins have not succeeded at home, away from home as of late. Their last two losses at Arizona, at USC, of course, different places compared to Corvallis and then Oregon. But still, the Bruins have to find a way to win away from home because you have to do so in Vegas in the Pac-12 tournament. You have Utah and Colorado, sneaky tough road matchups looming down near the end of the season. And then you have to win on the road in the NCAA tournament. So here's UCLA sitting here in an interesting week. There's ever a game that Mick Cronin and the Bruins needed desperately to get back on the road track. Oregon State being just laid right out in front of them is a perfect game to get the guys feeling good about playing on the road again. And interestingly enough, this is the first road game for the Bruins with Amari Bailey. Well, I guess second home road game with Amari Bailey, considering the USC game, but you could say 3 games in, maybe 100%. Only the second road game UCLA's played with Amari Bailey since the Maryland game in mid-December. So the Bruins have come back with Amari Bailey at the end of January, with them playing at SC, had those 2 home games. So the Bruins, with this new look, more fully healthy lineup, it's the first time they've kind of played with it, second time they've played with it since mid-December. And here we are cruising to the middle of February. So it's been that long, and that's what Mick Cronin is looking to learn how to get his freshmen in different hostile environments. But playing Oregon State, they sit here 9-15, 3-10 in conference coming into the week. Oregon State last year was a 3-28 team, 1-19 in Pac-12 play, and lost 18 consecutive games to end the season last year, considering they were an Elite Eight team the year prior under their head coach, Wayne Tinkle. So for the Bruins, they have to focus on stopping 2 players, Jordan Pope and Glenn Taylor Jr. The Beavers this year close to beating Duke on a neutral site, lost by 3. Lost to USC. Remember, the Bruins got Oregon for their one-off Pac-12 game, and USC got Oregon State. And Oregon State almost got them, but they ended up losing by a single point, I believe, in that one earlier this season. So this is a weird Oregon State team who UCLA should very well thump. They should thump this team and not have this game any closer than 20 points. Under no circumstances, this team, I think, in my mind, is worse than Washington. Of course, Washington State, despite their poor record and despite similar records, think about it. What Washington State's now like 10-15, Oregon State's 9-15, two very different records because Oregon State's lost to Portland State twice, and they're near the bottom of the Big Sky. They've lost them twice, neutral side, home, whatever it is. The Beavers, they do play a little bit better at home. They're 8-4, but just a little bit different to go up to Corvallis. The only time you play the Beavers, so that's the one thing on this one-off where maybe the Beavers come out and the scouts either a little wrong or they play above their minds. UCLA has to be wary of that. But Oregon State just got thumped, absolutely blasted by Arizona by like 30-plus points. So this is a Bruin matchup to get their guys settled on the road. Of course, Jaime Jaquez Jr., you heard me talking basketball early in the week, just completely passed over his stud muffin of a night, considering he had, 20-plus points, 15 rebounds, and a dominant double-double. But it's the Bruins need to focus on the youngsters, the role players, how they can handle these road environments. One, not so tough, and the other one after, which I'll talk about in just a moment, against the Oregon Ducks, which I think is the toughest one remaining in the road. So UCLA, Oregon State, it's Jordan Pope who averages just about 12 and a half points per game. Glenn Taylor Jr., 11 points per game. But this is an Oregon State team that if this was ever a cupcake laying there, if you're more of a cinnamon roll person, if you're more of an ice cream person, brownies, this is like, oh my goodness, what did I want? I wanted this. You're going to a friend's house and you're sitting there and they give you a treat. You're like, oh, it's been a while since I hung out with a friend at their place, and they give you a treat. It's a brownie, it's a cookie, whatever it is. This is that mouth-watering matchup of just, easy for the Bruins. You would think on paper heading in. Oregon State only averages about this season 62 points per game. In Pac 12 play, they average less than 60 points per game. The Bruins under Mick Cronin, which I talked about in the most recent episode, I believe, are over 60 wins and only 3 losses when opponents score less than 66 points with Mick Cronin at the helm of the UCLA men's basketball program. So if there's ever a game the Bruins could just say, hey, there's 2 guys averaging 10 or more, can we stop this Oregon State team? The answer should be yes, as Jordan Pope is the only player for Oregon State averaging over 10 points per game in conference play for the Beavers. Another thing, the one glaring thing that Oregon State could give the Bruins a little bit of trouble. They shoot 33%, I believe, overall from three. But in Pac 12 play, they actually shoot 36% from three, which is not a horrible number. So if they get red hot from three, that is the one thing that could make the Bruins a little fearful, considering they got some good wing defense to the Bruins. But if Oregon State, 36% from downtown, if they hit it at a high clip, say they hit like 15 threes at a 50% or better clip, and it's a high number because that's what it's going to take for Oregon State to have a ridiculous game to beat the Bruins. That is the one caveat where Oregon State can make this. Of course, in today's day and age, 3-point shots, say the Bruins go 3 of 22 and they forget how to play on the road, like they had the last 2 games in the second halves against the Wildcats and the USC Trojans, and Oregon State hits 50% of their threes, 15 or more of them, then Oregon State very well could compete and beat the Bruins, but they'll have to score a lot of points. If the Bruins don't wake up and Oregon State hits threes, that is what this matchup will lead itself into being a scary one to come day out. But other than that, all the numbers in terms of their lack of scoring, their inability to do anything sometimes, gets stops defensively, the Bruins should feast in this matchup against Oregon State. Absolutely feast. Because the Oregon game, I've been teasing about this for over a week plus. The Oregon game in this 3-week stretch of Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, Colorado, the Oregon game is the toughest game left on the schedule on the road, and it's the toughest game for a 3 to 4 week stretch, arguably, for UCLA, considering they still got to go and play at Utah and Colorado. But I think this Oregon game is going to serve as a much tougher test than what people thought Washington State would be last week. And it did not serve to be because the Bruins woke up in the second half and just door closed. Bam, no more. We'll talk about the Dana Altman squad, round 2 between the Bruins and Ducks, who's returning for Oregon that did not play in the first matchup, which can make a key difference for the Bruins scouting report. And we'll talk about things leading up forward in the Pac 12 play and everything in between. So we'll tell you about that. But first, we'll tell you more about FanDuel because if you've heard it by now with FanDuel, just know that we're really, really, really excited about our new sports betting partner. FanDuel is our new sports betting partner, the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. If you're new to it, it's even better. They've got so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. All you have to do is download FanDuel right now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You can get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. From money line, point spreads, who's going to score touchdowns, just know that the FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, super easy to use. You get your winnings paid instantly. If you're throwing all sorts of funny props on the big game, you get it back to you instantly. So that's why you got to join FanDuel right now, FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim a no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and now with us again at Locked On. Cruising on into segment 2 of Locked On UCLA. We previewed the Oregon State matchup. Now we're going to go right to it into this Oregon matchup because the Bruins should set themselves up for success with an Oregon State dub. Should put them on 3 in a row. 3 fairly easy matchups with teams that are at least 5 or more games under 500 or 4 games under 500 based on when the Bruins played them. From Washington to Washington State to Oregon State. Should be easy and done. But this Oregon game, despite the Ducks being 14-10, 8-5 in conference play, slowly sliding up into that 4th place mantle after beating Arizona State. It's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde Ducks team for Dana Altman in now his 13th year, because Oregon lost to Colorado by 23. And then the next night, they won at Utah by 10. They've lost to UC Irvine and Utah Valley. If you haven't heard those schools, well, you should learn more mid-major basketball because it's fun to cover. But mid-major teams at home by close to double figures. Irvine just blasted them at home. They lost at Stanford, but they also beat down Arizona by 19 points and then went on the road to Arizona State and beat Arizona State. So they beat both of the Arizona schools at least once and competed against Arizona a second time. And one of the things for UCLA, considering they played Oregon in their second of 2 of those one-off Pac-12 games back in early December, December 4th, 2022, 2 p.m. Sunday, lazy tip. We're all thinking about football and yada, 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 right after the title game and everything. But it was a lazy Sunday afternoon when the Ducks came in and competed. The Bruins did win by 9, 65-56 over the Ducks, but the Ducks were up by 6 at the half, led by a little more, and the Bruins turned it on in the second half against Nafali Dante, Will Richardson, and Quentin Guerriere and the Ducks. So those are 3 guys to look out for. Dante, the big man in the post, he's not a shooter. He'll go slam it in your face, and he can rebound about 7 rebounds per game. Will Richardson, the senior for the Ducks, who recently put in 22 against Zona, only scored 13 points against the Bruins, but he's number 2 in assists per game in the Pac-12 and is one of the better players. Will play almost as many minutes as possible. Will Richardson, and he'll stay on the floor, and Guerriere can be a nice shooter when he's red hot. But there's a couple of players that UCLA has to look out for against the Ducks when it comes to playing Oregon. 2 guys that did not play coming off injury. You have Jermaine Couisnard, who was injured, had to deal with an injury in the offseason, non-contact, had to have surgery. I think it was a patellar tendon in his knee, and he came back. And he's a 34% three-point shooter. And when Oregon beat Arizona, I'm pretty sure Couisnard, he scored 27. So this is a guy that can light it up from downtown and is a key player, transfer from South Carolina, an All-SEC first-team member way back when. Still has another year of eligibility if he wants to use it, that COVID year. So Couisnard is that shooter that can help lengthen this Oregon lineup that's only played in about 10 games so far this year, heading into his game against SC. So that's a guy that can shoot and get red hot. If he's feeling good, feeling healthy, that's a guy that did not play in game 1. UCLA was healthy and playing. Oregon was a little shorthanded, considering they had Couisnard off and Nate Biddle. Biddle's a 7-foot forward center. Could be a backup to Nafale Dante, but he's a guy that, despite playing a lot less games than Dante and most of the Ducks, he also has come back from injury and did not play in that game against UCLA. Rebounds, has had a 13 rebound game recently in conference and has 11 blocks in his last 4 games heading into the Thursday-Saturday matchups for the Oregon Ducks. So he can be a force down low as a backup coming in the paint. He's also started, swat some shots. He can rebound, even if he's not scoring. Defense and rebounding is his claim to name, claim to fame, whatever it is, So he can rebound. They've got a shooter. So they've got more weapons. The reason being that, they went and blew out Arizona when those guys just came back, especially Couisnard, who just got healthy and exploded. And then Arizona on the road in Oregon at Matthew Knight Arena, probably weren't expecting it, and they came out and played one of their best games. One of those dark horse teams that could be like that Oregon State team of a couple years ago. When the Bruins went to the Final Four, Oregon State went to the Elite Eight, winning 6 consecutive games through the Pac-12 tournament and up to the Elite Eight. Oregon did that not too recently, I believe, before COVID, going on a run through the Pac-12 tournament and doing that as well. Oregon, I think, is that team alongside Washington State. One of those teams, I think, is going on a run in the Pac-12 tournament. I could be wrong, but it's either the Cougars or the Ducks. Those are 2 teams that I do not want to face in the Pac-12 tournament or at any point during the rest of the season, other than this Ducks game in Eugene because it's a tough place to play. It's a weird Saturday matchup coming off of a Thursday game, Thursday night against Oregon State. And, it's just tough to play, right? Who was the last team that beat UCLA at home? It was Oregon. No fans, but they're the last team to beat UCLA at home. And Dana Altman always has his team coached up. And despite their most recent setback against Arizona, they've got the wins. They've got some weird losses. But overall, they will be ready to play. And the Bruins, this is their toughest matchup in the next few weeks and their toughest matchup on the road, I think, potentially for the rest of the season, considering Utah slide, the weirdness of Colorado. Those will be tough road games, but this Oregon game is very odd. This is the toughest game in these middle 3 weeks of the season before Utah, Colorado, and before Arizona State, Arizona. Take a pause. We'll breathe in. So, what does this mean for UCLA going forward as we move into segment 3? Everybody's close. You lose this Oregon game, and all of a sudden, that Arizona game is up for first place, up for grabs, and the Bruins has to be perfect on this all the way out. They have to be absolutely perfect with this Oregon game if they lose it. If they can win the Oregon game, barring no setbacks against Oregon State, and you take care of business against Stanford and Cal at a place where you've been absolutely dominant, right? Winning at home, the nation's longest active home winning streak. But you have to play on the road. And as Mick Cronin says, if you turn it over, you're not going to play. When I was in Cincinnati, we didn't turn over the basketball. When we were on the road, we were a good program at Cincinnati. And when you don't turn it over, unlike what the Bruins have done, especially at SC, especially against Arizona in some key parts of that game, and they couldn't shoot, you're not going to win road games, even if it's Oregon State or Oregon. But the Oregon State game, put it on a tee, should be smacked away, should lead UCLA to a very good week. I think they can beat the Ducks on the road, but don't be surprised if the Ducks, just for the second time this season, with some new weapons that weren't there the first time, come in and compete. And if the Bruins win this Oregon game, this is a sneaky tough road matchup. Of their Pac-12 road games, other than Oregon, other than Arizona and USC, this has got to be a sneaky one. Mind you, remember, they went to Maryland and blasted the Terrapins by 40, right? They just destroyed them out of the building in the first, from the jump ball, it was over. So they have this capability of going on the road, playing spectacular defense against some quality teams and coming away with wins. But UCLA's got to do it. A win, and you can keep a little bit of a leg up on Arizona in the loss column because it's so close. Just they have the same amount of wins heading into this Oregon State week, but the loss column is so tight, so crucial. Arizona will play one less game when they go play ASU at home, though. So this is a game the Bruins must get, and they can set themselves up for possible, you don't want to say it, but a mulligan with Colorado, Utah, and Arizona State all looming ahead of Arizona at home, the regular season finale for the Pac-12 regular season championship. And again, you got to earn those wins, right? You got to start building those wins. The weirdness of Oregon could truly destroy your net ranking, could ruin your quad 1, quad 2 wins. You get this win, it looks good, but after the Pac-12's kind of come crumbling down to earth with their weird non-conference pre-Pac-12 schedule, with everybody losing weird games here and there, a loss at Oregon is not going to help your NCAA tournament seed line. Not going to help in the Pac-12 tournament. Set yourselves up for more quad 1 wins or an easy path to the Pac-12 tournament title game. That's where UCLA, we would like to see this week against Oregon and Oregon State. Would love to see a good scoring game from Tiger Camp. I'd love to see a 15-point game, 20-point game, especially against Oregon State. Have him dominate, be a good guard, have him score 20 points per game, 20 points, maybe average 15 a game for both those two games on efficient shooting. Would love to see Campbell do that. And then also would love to see Bona dominate Oregon State and see how he plays against some stiff interior defense and offense. Dante for one, and if Biddle comes in for Oregon, that would be a nice test. So for Tiger, I'd like to see him dominate the Oregon State matchup. And for Bona, after a good test against Mohamed Gay, gets another interesting test with a Biddle probably coming off the bench. We'll see for Oregon. And then Nafali Dante, the second leading scorer for the Ducks, coming in. And for Jalen Clark, that matchup's either going to be Pope or Taylor Jr. against Oregon State, and then probably Will Richardson, game 1 against Oregon. And we'd love to see Jalen Clark as he ended the Washington State game, a nice scoring threat back into double figures. Can those 3-point numbers get better on the road? Is it a mental thing? Is it a physical thing? Is there a hitch in the shot? On the road, Clark, less than a 20% 3-point shooter. That's what's led UCLA to some struggles, except when, say, David Singleton comes out and saves the team like he has a couple of times, getting hot against an ASU, getting hot against other opponents like a Maryland, right? So we love to see Clark score the basketball, shoot the basketball well. Love to see Bona continue to be his dominant self, and Tiger score. Hawkes, Hawkes we almost expect. Even what Don McClain said in the Pac-12 broadcast, Pac-12 network broadcast against the Washington State Cougars, you kind of looked up and you're like, Hawkes is 24-15, 25-15? That happened? Just kind of slipped my mind in that podcast when I was reacting to that Washington State game. Just kind of quiet. You just expect Hawkes to be there. Sometimes a little bit above 50%, sometimes a little bit below. He gets his shots, puts up a lot of them, will play hard defense, rebound the basketball. And you just forget that Hawkes is that good and is competing for a Wooden Award finalist. And while he probably won't win it, he could certainly be amongst the guys on the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, or Pac-12, defensive team, because Jalen Clark should win Defensive Player of the Year. That's how close and how dominant this Bruins team can be, and that's what I'd like to see heading into these Oregon State matchups. One of the easiest games you have left on the schedule, and one of the toughest games, the sneaky tough games. Sneaky easy, sneaky tough, all in 1 week, and the Bruins should pass both these tests easily. They should. You lose to Oregon State, my goodness. I'll be in flames. I will be unbelievably angry, unbelievably frustrated. Against Oregon, frustrated, but still understanding of what the task is at hand in Eugene. Other than that, go check out Locked On College Basketball. Make that your second listen today. You have Andy Patton, Isaac Shea, they're good hosts, analyzing across the nation college basketball, preparing you for March Madness. That is just around the corner. The tournament, just like it was here yesterday. And now, today, the corner, we're creeping to it. It's just around the bend. Just around. Yeah, we're not going to sing. It's right there. And the tournament is coming up closer than you think. Pac-12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. Excitement, revenge, everything in between as the Bruins look for an elusive national championship over the last 2+ decades. So here we go. I need an excited 8-clap Bruins fans. Get your hands in the air. 8-clap time, baby. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off on Locked On UCLA. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.